Hello, welcome back. In this lesson, we want to talk about the independent thumb. And this is part of the broader arrangement or sort of treasure chest of cool things in fingerstyle. Fireworks or ear candy or the things that sizzle, which I find that the thumb hopping thing was one that was so fascinating to me, and I had such a difficult time really getting a handle on it. And so I want to talk about that in this lesson, and then we can explore what those options are once you actually get the thumb sort of at least sonically operating independent from the rest of the fingers. There are some really cool options that open up, all right? So the first thing that we want to do is just go through this exact exercise, and then we will break it down together. So we'll try this now at 100 beats per minute. 1, 2, ready, go. All right, so developing an independent thumb, and it's usually always referred to as an independent thumb, but I want to think about it in a slightly different way. It will be sort of, again, as we said, sort of sonically operating independent of the rest of the fingers, but sometimes it's really difficult to learn and really grasp what these patterns are doing and actually developing kind of some of that if you think about it as entirely separate. What I mean by that is that when I first started experimenting with this, I would play just the thumb part, and I would look at the other part, right? And then I would somehow think if I've got one part and I've got another part, I'll just put them together and it'll work. And it never did. It never does. And there's so much frustration that comes into that, right? So if you feel like you've ever struggled with the independent thumb, or this is your first time, starting to develop it, this is kind of a neat technique that I feel like helped me immensely to really get a handle on this. So one thing that you want to think about is that when you're reading the guitar tab for each of these notes, right? Don't think in terms of the bass line where the thumb is, and then the melody notes where the rest of the fingers are. That's sort of thinking about, that's reading the tab horizontally, right? I want to start reading the tab vertically. What that means is that line up every individual event as it's happening. So sometimes you'll have the thumb playing a note at the same time as one of the other fingers. Sometimes the thumb is on its own. But if you start thinking about each event at a time vertically, then you're putting together a pattern for your brain that doesn't feel like two separate things going on at the same time. Even if in the end that's what it sounds like. I think it's important to think about them as working as one unit, right? With just different jobs at different points. So let's dive into what we mean by that in this specific exercise. The great thing about this is it's one chord. We're only going to keep one chord, and you just move basically one finger, and then that shape will just move to 3 different spots on the neck. But let's start with this chord here. It's an A dominant 7th here. You're going to put your first finger on the 10th fret of the B, and then you're going to go ahead and put your second finger on the 11th fret of the D, and then put your third finger on the 12th fret of the A, and then your pinky is going to go on the 12th fret of the G, and you get this sound. All right? We're going to incorporate the high E into this pattern as well. And when we need to grab a lower note here, we're going to put the third finger down on, and so it's going to still stay on the 12th fret. You just go from here all the way down to the low E string, okay? So now let's look at the tab closely, and again, don't think about what is separating between the thumb and the rest of the fingers. Think about what's happening at the same time together. So the first thing that's happening is your thumb and your middle finger are going to be hitting the A and the B string. So, okay, so we pinch those together, right? Pinch those. Okay, and now I have this is on its own. So you'll notice just in the tab that 12 is on its own. 12, and then the thumb comes up and grabs this here. So just start practicing that. Okay, and we're gonna go, just add now one more thing to that. So now your ring finger is gonna grab that high E. Okay, and the next thing you're gonna do, you'll notice, is that that high E is on its own, and then we have a 12 on the low E string that's on its own as well. Okay, so we have, then after that, your index is gonna be on its own up here, right? That's gonna grab the 12, and then your thumb is gonna grab 11 on the D there, and then your middle goes all the way back up to grab the 10 here. So slowly you have, okay? Go real slow through each individual thing, and again, remember each event at one time. Okay? Once you get that pattern, you'll notice that we're sort of staying around the same idea, but we're slightly changing it for the next measure. So you're going to go. Okay, so let's go through that slowly. In measure 2, you have the thumb on the 12, and then index on 12. Then you have 11 on the D string, and then your ring finger goes all the way up for the high E. Thumb comes down to the 12th fret here. Okay, so just line that up very, very slowly. And I find it's very counterintuitive to do it this way, but to think about going really, really, really slow. We've said this previously in this course. Sometimes the fastest way to get something is to actually play it unbelievably slow. And that can feel, again, very taxing on your mental RAM, but it's important to make sure that you give time for your brain to pick up on those patterns, right? So if you go slow, you may be able to solve an issue sometimes within 2 minutes that might take you 2 weeks or 2 months if you try to solve it always playing up to tempo, right? This is just really sort of, aiming the shot before you take it, you know? So in measure 2 again. Okay, now what we want to do is think about what's happening with the rhythm. So that is going to be the same exact pattern on the left hand, on your fretting hand, as well as your picking hand when you go to another spot on the fretboard. But now we want to think about what's happening with the rhythm. So this is very different than just sort of straight notes where da 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 da. So eighth notes, we think in terms of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and this is like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And I know this sounds really stupid, but the way that I got a feel for that when I was learning this some years back was just the idea of, like, sort of a lazy horse just walking in the desert, you know, dun da dun da dun da. Has a very kind of like lazy feel to it. You're holding out one note a split second longer, and then a little bit of a quick, for the next step to come there. So just think da 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 da. That's different than 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that's just called swinging eighth notes, right? That gives you that kind of nice. You have the urge to move when you hear a rhythm like that, and that's why it's basically just delaying where you think the emphasis should be. All right, so you don't have to worry about putting that into the exercise yet. What's good is to actually just get a handle of what's happening mechanically with where the thumb is hitting and your other fingers, but just know that'll be kind of like one of the last things that you can add to it, and then it's really, really fun to play. So then the next chord, we're going to go down here to this spot of the fretboard, take that same exact chord, and now your first finger is on the 3rd fret of the B, and then you have your pinky on the 5th fret of the G, and then the 2nd finger is on the 4th fret of the D, and the 3rd finger is on the A, on the 5th fret there, and you're doing the same thing. Okay, and remember, line that up slowly. So we have at the same time your thumb and your middle, then index is on its own, then thumb is on its own, ring is on its own, thumb on the low 5 on its own, then index on its own on the 5, then we have the 4, right? If it feels like going that slowly can feel like even more confusing, that's okay, because I think that is usually the spot that you can really zoom in and fix those issues. Then after we have a handle on the pattern at this spot of the fretboard, we go all the way back up to the top, all right? We're right where we started. Okay, so that's the same as the first two measures, and then we're just going to do a slight variation here. Now we're going to go, okay, move the same chord, but now your first finger is going to be on the 5th fret of the B. Then your pinky is on the 7th fret of the G, your second finger on the 6th fret of the D, and then your third finger on the 7th fret of the A. Okay, so, and then from here, the very last measure here, go back to where we went previously in measure 3 there. All the way back up here. Now, I've heard different people talk about developing that sort of independent thumb idea. I want to find like a different phrase for it, but that is a very common phrase that you hear. You really want it to work as a team with all of the other fingers, so it's not just on its own, you know. But I've heard some people talk about how they've practiced it for a very long time, and then one day it sort of clicked. And other people that it was just sort of like they got better at it a little bit at a time until they finally got it. That was my experience, but I do know if you feel like you get frustrated with the independent thumb, for whatever reason, everyone's brains just work totally differently. You may just it may just click one day, or you may have to just keep chipping away at it. But don't give up no matter what. Where that breakthrough happens, if it's gradual or if it's instant, it's possible to get this. So take your time to go through that. So now we've looked at that in detail. Let's actually go through this together now at 100 beats per minute. 1, 2, ready, go. Alright, I hope you have had fun with that. For a deeper dive into some more of some of the thumb study stuff, I do have a course called 30 fingerstyle licks you need to know, and I also have a course of closer look thumb control that's really, really specifically focusing on how to get more comfortable with that thumb. In the next lesson, we're going to be talking about sort of a single string tremolo while you arpeggiate with your thumb. It's a really fun technique that I saw early on, and I just had to acquire it as soon as possible. So we will be diving into that in the next lesson, so stick around. I'll see you there. Bye.